Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the Seaman. Now I want to welcome you to another edition of the Seaman's Cinema Sit-Down. As you can see, we're chilling in my car, which means it's live reaction time, and since it's Wednesday night, that means it's American Horror Story Apocalypse live reaction time. That's right, folks. For those that missed last week, or just kind of missed anything that I've done with American Horror Story, back around Comic-Con, when I tweeted out the title announcement, got a lot of play, and I was like, you know what? Let me do a live reaction after the episodes. Maybe that, will have a nice reception. Understatement of the year, man. I cannot thank you guys enough. I'm so appreciative to see the outpouring of views on this video. Over 2.1 thousand as we headed into episode 2 tonight. That's more than double any of my large videos and like quadruple, most of my videos. I really appreciated that. And it wasn't just views, man, from likes to comments, and they weren't just like, hey, you did a great job, but also comments that pointed some things out about the episode that I missed. And I loved interacting with you guys all week long. I really appreciate that. And it solidified the fact that I am, without a doubt, have to do this every single week. Because why not, man? The show is so good, and it's so worth talking about every week. And if you guys are going to show up, then I'm going to show up too. So what we're going to do, man, live reaction real quick, just kind of go through non-spoiler stuff, give anyone that didn't see the episode but's checking out the video time to get out, and then we'll dive in to breaking down the episode and also mention anything that I may have missed in my video from last week that I put together kind of in between, Wednesday to Wednesday. So pull up a chair. Take a seat. We're getting ready to dive into episode 2 of American Horror Story Apocalypse, The Morning After. And I tell you, man, I dig this bunker so freaking much, man. All the stone walls, all of the candles and lanterns and the way the lighting is, everything about this set in particular is just so working right now with the vibe that they're trying to create. It's super eerie. Throw in the Victorian, kind of England wardrobe, and like you are just setting up something that's so out of place, right? Like they'll mention things about current day, right? Like internet or TV stars or movies, and you're like, oh yeah, that's right. We are in current day, post, nuclear war, living in this bunker that makes you feel like you're kind of in a different time period. And it sets the perfect mood, it sets the perfect tone of eerie and creepiness, and allows everybody to play in a way that so far I think is working really well. And that's, again, one of the things that American Horror Story has proven time and time again. These first few episodes are where they thrive. Building this new world or area that we're in, or this new story, is something this show does so well. And again, the setting for this one is something I am loving. Now, as far as episode 2 goes, I am loving Evan Peters. I'm always loving Evan Peters, man. The guy is so good, and he thrives so much in this show throughout its course. And tonight, no different. Playing Mr. Gallant, this flamboyantly gay hairdresser. Again, like I said last week, man, like the style and the wardrobe totally fits who his character are, and giving him significant screen time tonight. Range of emotions, man. I mean, he brings in the drama, he brings in the serious brooding, the anger, the intensity, this crazy sexual tension, and then a bunch of laughs, man. He makes you laugh out loud more than once, and the devices he used to make you laugh, I thought were brilliant. The other person who really shined in this episode, of course, was Cody Fern, who's playing Langdon. There's more to that character, but we'll save that for the spoiler discussion. As far as we know, in the episode, he's only referred to himself as Langdon. He's one of the heads of the the cooperative. And, again, his wardrobe, fantastic, man. I love that he's got like this red eyeshadow kind of right in here that I really think kind of works, knowing things that we know about his character. And then the all-black approach that he wears most of the episode really works. And it sets up the pop when he throws on this kind of black trench coat with the red scarf. And then, throw the long blonde hair. I mean, his look, I think, is just perfect for what his character is. And then go into his approach, right? We saw him right at the end of last week's episode. We get him all episode long, man, and I really dig what he's doing. He's setting the perfect vibe for what this character needs to be, and the mystery behind him. And some of the things that we even get to learn about him, I think all played really well. And then everybody else that shows up in this episode is really strong too. Sarah Paulson has a really solid scene with Fern. Fern and Peters have multiple scenes together, and they are brilliant. Joan Collins has a couple nice moments, as per usual. And everybody else, Billy Lord and Adina Porter and Leslie Grossman, they all kind of pop in. The same with Joan Collins briefly, but they all do good things. And then, of course, Kyle Allen and Nash Santos, who are playing Timothy and Emily, they kind of bookend this episode for us in a way that I really was. I'm digging everywhere they're going right now. So that's it, man. That's all I'm gonna say about the episode. We've been rambling for a little bit. Really, really dug it. So now, if you have not seen episode 2 yet, now's the time to get out of Dodge, man. We are about to tear into this thing, man. Get into all the good spoiler stuff. So here we go, man. If you haven't seen the episode, you got 3, you got 2, you got 1. You better be out, because it is spoiler time, man. And before we dive into this week's episode, we got to go through things that I missed last week. And one of the things that, in talking to all you guys online last week, I realized right away I needed to go back and rewatch Murder House and Coven. As much as I do remember, specifically those 2 and, of course, Asylum. They're my 3 favorites, so they kind of always stuck with me. But rewatching them, huge bonus. I immediately started picking up on some things, seeing some things that were going on. I was like, oh, it was so worth rewatching both of these things. So the first thing that was pointed out to me by, it's either American Horror Story Ghost or AHS Ghost. I don't have it in front of me, but they pointed out that when Langdon shows up at the end of episode 1, he flashes his cooperative badge, and on the cooperative badge it says Michael Langdon. And we know from the casting and some of the stuff that was discussed earlier, and kind of stuff that I had forgot, that Michael Langdon is, of course, Tate Langdon and Vivian Harmon's son from Murder House, who is the Antichrist. And I was like, when that got dropped, I was like, how did I not see that? How did I miss that? Because that's a big one. I mean, and that's not like a huge drop, obviously, because it was stuff that was discussed in pre-production. We knew that Michael Langdon was going to be in it. But once I heard that, then all of a sudden I started thinking about some things, and when I rewatched, I've noticed some stuff. So for one, we're set in LA, which is also where the murder house is. And when we first get the outside shot of where the bunker is, very similar to a different angle, right? It's not like from across the street, it's closer. But a very similar kind of landscape to where Murder House was, which led me, as well as some other people last week that I was talking to kind of believe that maybe the bunker is actually at the Murder House location, which would be our first tie-in, even before we get to Michael Langdon, to Murder House. And then all of a sudden that clicked in other places, right? The way I kind of said that Bates and Paulson were kind of giving off a Coven vibe. That would set up perfectly if you were having the witches and the Antichrist on the opposite ends of each other, kind of combating each other. Makes sense that Paulson doesn't get along, doesn't like what the cooperative is doing, wants to establish her own rules and do things her way. And then one of the other things I noticed that I think kind of, for me, solidifies the fact that something about Bates and Paulson has to tie back to Coven. And it's not anything that's direct, but more of a subtlety that I think is supposed to be a reminder. Paulson, I had mentioned that every time she's walking, she has a walking cane, and she constantly makes kind of like the knocking noise as she's walking. So you can hear the cane at all times. Completely forgot that Paulson's character in Coven, when she goes blind, has a walking stick that she is constantly tapping on the floor, as you would to kind of figure out where you're going. But that sound, even when I was watching Coven, there were a couple times where the beat was very similar to what Paulson was doing in Apocalypse. So yeah, no direct tie, right? It's not the same cane. It's nothing like that. But the sound in and of itself is something that reminds you of Coven, that makes me still even think stronger that Paulson must be tied into that storyline, at least with her character, Miss Venable, and possibly Miss Miriam Mead, who is Bates's character. Although, after watching episode 2, I don't know. But yeah, those were kind of the big things that really kind of stuck out to me from watching the Murder House and Coven seasons that we saw in episode 1. So those, I'm sure I missed a few other things, but those are kind of the big ones that I was like, oh man, we're already kind of laying the seeds for where this could be going. bring us into tonight's episode, and we'll start right away with Langdon, who, as I mentioned, is Michael Langdon, the Antichrist. And when I was talking about the eyeshadow that was in here, that's red. Not that they look like horns, but for whatever reason, every time I saw him on screen and you see the red, it just immediately made me think horns. And that's got to be something. I'm sure I'm not the only person that thought that. Really, really clever makeup idea to kind of drop hints that if you forgot that Michael Langdon might be the Antichrist, that, or you were unaware, he didn't. Nice little hints and things that I think play into his character, and the contrast of the black and red, and like I said, his style kind of worked really, really well. But we open up tonight with not Langdon or Evan Peters Gallant, but we instead open up with Emily going into her closet, to find whatever she was going to wear, and a whole bunch of snakes fall out of the closet. Now that immediately also drew me right back to Coven, made me think of Angela Bassett and her voodoo spells. Almost any time she is casting some sort of voodoo spell, there are snakes that look very similar to the snakes we see here. So again, not necessarily a direct tie to something specific, but again, things that are making us kind of draw connections to, oh shoot, that kind of makes me think of that. So I wonder where the snakes come from, how they're playing. Maybe it's Coven tied in, even though I think we're at the murder house location. So really, really interesting way to open. And then we have, Bates's Miriam Mead kills the snakes and then cooks them. And when they open up their trays, the snakes slither back out. That screams magic like crazy. So I don't know who could be pulling those strings unless it's Paulson. But certainly getting some interesting kind of magic vibes early on in this episode. That is, of course, before we flip into, the Mr. Gallant story. And basically what we find out is Langdon kind of meets with everybody and says, 3 other locations, Texas, West Virginia, New York, those bunkers have been overrun. This is the only one that's left, and we have this place called the Sanctuary. I'm here to determine which one of you are worthy of going. Something he mentioned to Paulson last week. And Peters immediately shoots his hand up, is like, I'll be your first person to question. And everyone was kind of like caught off guard by that. And, Paulson and Bates late in the episode have a conversation, where they reference, like, it was strange that he threw his hand up first. Like, why would you want to do that? But knowing Peters' kind of braggadocious style to the way he carries himself doesn't feel out of character. But the conversations that they have, very, very interesting as we dive into, things about the fact that he hates his grandmother, played by Joan Collins. Evie, I believe, is her name. And you kind of go into the fact that she just never kind of like respected or loved him. She would throw these gay, dinner parties, and kind of the point where he tells Langdon this, and this is where the humor comes in. Where he tells Langdon, I stopped kind of allowing her to have any kind of control over me at one of these parties. And you got these 3 gay guys there talking with Joan Collins, and in comes Peters in a tank top, leather pants, leather hat, big glasses, very stereotypical kind of garb, and just the way he plays that whole scene makes you laugh out loud. I absolutely love. When Peters does stuff like that with a character, it really, really worked quite well. And then we kind of jump back to Emily and Tim. They're the kind of our like anchor point that we pop to almost every segment once. And Emily's talking about we should get out of here. Like, she doesn't trust Langdon. And when we jump back to Peters, and now after the conversations that he's had with Langdon, where Langdon's really trying to figure out who he is. And Peters comes on to Langdon in the room because he's getting a vibe, and Langdon shuts him down really harshly. So when we jumped out of Peters, he's actually in his room, kind of getting familiar with himself, and he is thinking about Langdon. And we get 2 flashes of Langdon in a pentagram covered in blood. So clearly, either this is some sort of foreshadowing. I'm not thinking that's what Peters was thinking. Maybe it's what was actually going on at that time. But certainly very interesting imagery. And then all of a sudden, like, he hears a noise, and he looks, and there's someone coming in. Now, he's assuming it's Langdon, and boom! First legit, real big murder house drop. The Rubber Man shows up. Now, we know that the Rubber Man is typically Tate, who is also played by Evan Peters. Multiple times in this episode, I thought that Peters' Gallant was on his way to death. I thought he was going to get it several times tonight. And when he finally did, I was expecting the rubber mask to come off and it be Peters. But of course, that would have been a lot for 2 episodes in. And that does not happen. But we do get to see the rubber man several times throughout the episode. Including the scene that follows that, where Tim and Evie kind of break into Langdon's office, find his computer, find out that he has internet access, which, right, is kind of crazy. If there's no infrastructure, how can he be sending emails? He sent an email, like several emails about a week from that date. That's after the nuclear, war is started. And that brings me back to something else that I kind of forgot to mention, that I had mentioned and kind of noticed last week, in the fact that it kind of felt like the cooperative would probably be behind a lot of this stuff. And when you watch Murder House, Paulson's character kind of talks about the Pope, and they're talking about the Pope, and that the Pope gets a box when he becomes the new Pope. He gets a box, opens it, and that inside the box, a piece of paper that describes how the world will end. And the only thing that we know for certain is that is all set into the motion the minute the Antichrist is born, which is what happens, in Murder House, and Michael Langdon is our Antichrist. So that kind of also, kind of plays into the fact that, like, the cooperative maybe is behind all of this. Like, how could you be sending emails if there's no infrastructure, unless they're pulling the wool over people's eyes? So maybe the nuclear holocaust isn't as big as it seems. I have no idea, right? There was news, but we didn't see anywhere else happen. We only saw L.A. So it'll be very interesting to see where they go in with the cooperative and how much they're behind and how much has actually happened. Because we don't really know, because we've been inside the bunker with the cast so far. But what they find email-wise is they find, like, that he was talking about West Virginia was low on supplies. Then 3 video files were sent of New York, West Virginia, and Texas, all of those outposts getting overrun. 3rd email is about Venable. Shocking, Langdon knows that Venable has been making her own rules. And it's marked her as a red target as well as Gallant, and are 2 people he plans to kill. At least that's the way the email makes it seem. And there are also 2 people that he thinks are possible legit candidates, but even those people he's not sure of. Now, I think the way that's set up and the fact that Tim and Emily find it make you think Tim and Emily must be those 2. I don't think those are the 2 he's talking about. Too easy of a setup. Who he's talking about, really don't have any clue, other than we know it's not Peters and it's not Paulson, which means it's probably not Bates either. But it'll be interesting to see where they go with that stuff. And overall, the Rubber Man, I just love seeing the Rubber Man in action. And he pops up multiple times throughout the entire episode. And the one thing, every time he pops up around Peters thinks that it's Langdon. So much so that, after he has sex with the Rubber Man, and he thinks it's Langdon, Paulson and Bates find out because his grandmother, Evie, rats him out, which plays into the fact that he hates his grandmother. And then they kind of, they strip him down to just his boxers, kind of string him up in the room where they, where they cleansed him and Stu, which also something I didn't point out. Loved the fact that Stu was the stew that they ate last week. So funny. And the humor's been really on point. And this room leads us to more humor that Peters dropped that I just thought was brilliant. Every time, so they're questioning him, trying to get more out of him about Langdon. He's probably thinking they're going to kill him for having sex after his grandmother outs him to Paulson and Bates. But instead, they're trying to get information on Langdon, try to figure out how they know each other. That's what they think. They think they know each other. And Bates is whipping Peters, and every time she hits him, he screams out the name of a gay rebel icon from the 70s and 80s. In this order: Rip Taylor, Larry Kramer, and Greg Louganis. Every time he does it, it makes you laugh out loud. And again, it plays perfectly into the character that he's built. But since we're talking about the Rubber Man and Peters, the way this episode ends, haunting. And already you're starting to, again, kind of starting to get the vibe that this has got to be the Murder House location. 1, why else would Rubber Man show up? And 2, that means we could be in store for more ghosts. And it would be interesting to be able to utilize anyone that's died in the inside of the bunker to come back. So it'll be interesting to see if we get any of that as we go into the preceding weeks. But the thing that we get toward the end is, the rubber man shows up again, and Peters is like, all right, Langdon, like, you really don't want to do anything with me. I'll follow you to your room. And the door that they go through, I think, is the same door that Emily and Tim go through earlier when they go into Langdon's room. So I feel like they're in Langdon's room, and he starts getting into it with the rubber man, and then he wants to get back at Langdon for saying he wouldn't sleep with him if he was the last man on Earth. He starts stabbing him, and then Langdon walks in. He turns, boom! He killed his grandma, Evie! So already, man, there are a lot of things that work, and I think most of them are murder house oriented. But like I said, the episode does drop a few things that made me think about Coven. I'm very interested to see where we're going. And of course, we have to wrap up what happens to Emily and Tim, as they were kind of our other anchor point throughout the episode. Because they find out that Langdon knows that Venables was making up her own rules, specifically in relation to sex, and if you have sex, death. And so they naturally, finally, they've been doing one kiss a week, right? Or one kiss a day, something like that. And they say, no more. And Tim's like, what are you doing? We're like, doing something we should have done right from the get-go. They sleep together, and they actually go to sleep together. And Venable and Meade come in, they find them, rip them on out. They have them in that same room, that cleansing room. And they're getting ready to shoot them, and Paulson's not there. Paulson's, she's let Meade kind of take him off. And Tim is able to react and fight as they're getting ready to shoot him, gets a hold of the gun, kills the two dudes that were going to kill him and Emily, and then shoots Meade. Now, this is the first thing that made me go, maybe one of my theories isn't right, because when Bates looks at her stomach, she's like pouring out white fluid. And at first I thought it was bones. And I went back and I rewound it, slowed it down, watched it over and over. And the one bone is leaking white drops. That makes me think maybe it's mechanical? Like, could she be a robot or a cyborg? I have no clue what that white blood meant. If you have a better clue as to what that could be, please let me know. But I was clueless. The only thing I could take away from is it didn't look like bone. It looked like almost mechanical pieces inside. So I'll be very interested to see where we're going there, because that total curveball for me. Unless, of course, I'm missing something. So that, that was kind of the big end right there, brings us to the end. And then we did get previews for next week, which we did not get after week 1, which I thought was interesting. But I was glad we got previews for next week. Looks interesting. The big takeaway from there is it's All Hallows Eve. If they are on the murder house grounds, this is when I think we're going to start seeing the ghosts show up. This could bring back a multitude of different characters, and it'll be really interesting. None of the previews hinted at any of that, other than it's just All Hallows Eve. So I'll be real interested. If it is indeed the murder house location like I'm thinking it is, we should see some other ghosts pop up next week. Very exciting, man. Like I said, I think they're off to a really strong start. As they usually are, and like I said, it'll be interesting to see where they go, if they can continue to keep building. So far, we're off to the right start, man. Episode 1, Episode 2 built off it. Keep on moving. You keep on doing that, we could be on our way to something really cool for American Horror Story. So there you go, man. That is my long-winded spoiler review of Episode 2. We got a lot of things going on. We'll be really interested to see how many things we've gotten right, or where exactly we go. So now it's your turn, man. Hit those comments down below like you guys do. If I got anything wrong, let me know. If I've missed anything or anything that I didn't talk about, hit those comments down below. Of course, if you're going to drop a spoiler, please note it for anyone that hasn't seen the episode yet. Also, let me know if you like this, this video or things that I said, or if I said anything you didn't think of. And if you like the video, please give me that thumbs up. And as always, if you're new here, please hit that subscribe and little bell so you get alerts every time I drop a new American Horror Story Apocalypse live reaction. So there you have it, man. That's all we got to say about Episode 2, the morning after. The countdown starts, man, a week away till Episode 3, when we'll be back talking more American Horror Story Apocalypse. Until then, my name is the Seaman. I'm signing off. Peace!
Hey, 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 I'm the Seaman and I'm running at ya.
Hey, hey, hey. Look at this. I got a video, and a subscribe button. Hey, hey, hey.